All right, everybody. It is, I guess, 5:30 on the dot, and so we will get going. Thanks for coming out. My name's Bo Bakken, and I am the fire chief with the North Mason Regional Fire Authority. Started there in 1996, so I have been with the Fire Authority for just about 23 years, and it's a job that I love. One of the things that's happening tonight, which is pretty neat, is this exact same meeting you probably saw on the flyer, if that's what got you here. But this exact same meeting is happening in 3 different locations right now, simultaneously in Mason County. And this was an idea of the Economic Development Council of Mason County to talk about the wildfire threat and how to get ready, how to prepare, how to bring awareness to the particular topic. And originally it was going to be a meeting that was going to happen down in Shelton, and down at the Civic Center. And I said, well, hey, that's great, but Mason County is about 1,000 square miles. How do we get the word out to the north and out to Hoodsport and out to the other side of the canal and all throughout? And so that's what we wanted to do. One of the neat things that's also happening is while we have some folks that are in attendance tonight, we also are, thanks to Diedrich and some of our other partners, we are broadcasting this from all 3 locations. And so if for the folks that can't make it tonight, we will be getting this information out hopefully over and over and over again through the broadcast. The reason for the meeting tonight is to really talk about wildland and the fire threat that's out there. And we are already into our wildland fire season for this year. It used to be that we would sit there at the Fire Authority and say, well, our wildland fire season kind of starts right around June, maybe end of June, first part of July, and we're generally wrapped up by September. And right now we can easily say, in fact, this year it happened, our fire season started in March, early March, and will more than likely go through November. And it will not surprise me if we are almost year round. And if you look at some of the southern parts of the United States, especially down in the southeast, it is wildland season where it never used to be before. It is a round the clock situation, round the year situation. The other thing that I would like to point out is that we've had a couple fires here in North Mason. I'm going to let Jeremy talk about that in a little bit more detail. But we've had we had a 25-acre fire that was just north of the Kitsap County line. We were the first to respond in, but it ended up being right around 25 acres. We had a 7-acre fire down in south of Matlock, roughly, I think, in either March or April. So the wildfire threat is definitely there. And what is difficult about what we're going to talk about tonight is that you could take wildfire preparation and it could be a week-long course by itself. When we talk about the different strategies and the different things that we do to fight fires, when you really talk about in-depth fire, wildland fire and activities and how we go about preventing and protecting ourselves, it could be a week-long course. And we're going to try to sandwich that down to an hour and a half. At the very end, we want to make sure, and Jeremy will talk about this here in a second, but we want to make sure that we open it up for questions and answers. So if there are some specific things that we do not get to tonight in the presentation, let's open it up and make sure, and we will not get out of here until every question gets answered. So with that, I welcome you. I appreciate you coming out. For everybody at home, I appreciate them watching on Mason Web TV for the North Mason broadcast. And I will turn it over to Community Outreach Coordinator Jeremy Hicks.
I'm going to use this one. All right. I'm going to use this one. Well, thank you all for coming. We have a presentation for you, like Chief Bakken said. Talk about a couple different topics today. We're going to do some introductions. We're going to have a brief story about why this can happen and how it could happen. Response to our wildland fire, how we do that. How to make your home safe, and our communication plan here in Mason County, how you guys get the information and the most up-to-date, accurate information. Evacuation, when we do it and why. And where you as citizens can find more information to help prepare yourself. And at the very end, we'll have a question and answer period where you guys can ask some questions, and we'll do the best of our ability to get those answers for you. If not, we'll figure out the answers and get back to you. So with that being said, let's start up here. Ken, what I'd like to do is just go around the room for the people speaking today, is just who you are and kind of the general area that you live. Okay? All right.
I'm Jane Quirk, and I live on the Burma Road in Thulia, off the Burma Road.
Jim Burton, I live in Duwato.
Lisa Roddy, Duwato.
John Moore, Duwato.
Marion Guy on North Shore Road.
Kay Massey, South Shore.
Ivy Greenwood, Old Belfair Highway.
Pat Stansel, Belfair Highway.
Lester, Millie, Ray, Collinsworth.
Jean Bray, Northeast Duwato Road, near the Burma Road.
Dave Alger, the same area.
Jess Fulkerson, I work in the fire department.
Brooke Quigley, South Shore.
Woody Flynn, Maggie Lake, CRP of North Mason.
Terry Law, North Mason Chamber, Zoom 106.
My Belfast and Bear Creek.
Jeremy Preston, Chief Lake.
All right.
Scott Cooper, I live on the North Shore.
Chief Cooper from the South Shore. North Shore Road. Did you say South Shore? Oh, okay, North Shore. The microphone's not helping my hearing at all today. So when we start talking about wildland fire, I think it's really easy for people to go, well, we see it on TV, we hear about it, we read about it, Facebook says this, Facebook has the most accurate information usually, right? So, but about a week ago, North Mason Fire responded to a small incident, luckily, and Miss Smith's here today, and it takes a lot of courage for somebody to come out. I talked to her last week and said, you know what, Miss Smith, we have this meeting next week, and I'd like you to come and tell us what happened and why it happened, and let people know that this could happen to anybody. So, Miss Smith, if you don't mind, let's welcome Miss Smith up to talk about her story.
No pressure, of course. I made 3 mistakes. Number 1, burning paper in a fire pit, which I guess isn't allowed. You don't need it, do you?
Can you hold this? It's for the people at home watching TV.
Okay, and am I supposed to push
just
it?
hold it.
All right, just hold it. Number 2 was not having a hose nearby, and number 3 was walking away from the fire. All 3 were really incredibly stupid. Fortunately, I did not leave the house. I immediately ran in the house. Well, I was in the house, and I glanced out and saw just this little bit of flame on the grass. So I went and filled a 2-quart pitcher. Now, I don't know what I thought I was going to do with that. My granddaughter was there, and she thinks this is all very funny. And so she immediately called 911. Fortunately, we have a lot of people, friends, family on the property, so we got the hoses right out. And the fire department responded very quickly, but we pretty much had it out. The thing that amazed me was how quickly it moved. I've never seen anything like that, because it was a very dry, grassy area. And if I would have left the house, if I wouldn't have been there, it had started toward my house. So it was a tough lesson to learn. And then, of course, they took an aerial picture, which my lovely granddaughter posted on Facebook and said, look what Grandma did. I tried to plead dementia as soon as they got there, but they weren't buying that at all. But I think, like I said, the one thing I did learn is it moves so quickly, and you can't be too careful. That's all.
Thank you.
And he didn't pressure me.
Thank you, Miss Smith. So with that story, I got a couple of pictures up here just to tell you how well that works. And we got this microphone, so we can pass it around. Just if you guys are going to be talking, we'll have you put this on so Dietrich can pick it up on the audio for the recording for people at home. And if he's not able to do that, then we will figure out something else. Is that working, Dietrich? Okay, perfect. I'm going to set that there. So here's an aerial photo of that. Here's the fire pit that it started in. So steel-lined fire pit designed to the standards with the setbacks that are approved in Mason County. Now, burning paper and versus not burning paper, you use enough paper to start it, but it should be dry season firewood. So we had a little chat about that. But other than that, the average person would go, this is an okay fire pit to start in. And that's the fire that it produced right there. Quickly. Spread in a matter of minutes. See how close it is to those houses? So we're going to talk about some ways and some defensible zones that you could put up. So let's talk about where we're at right now with wildfire responses. And I'm going to use wildfire, brush fire, wildland. They're all synonymous with each other, so I may use them interchangeably. In 2016, in all of Mason County, there was 88 calls for brush fires. 22 of those 88 were multi-jurisdictional, which means more than three or more agencies responded to that fire. Kind of classify that as, because you could have a beauty bark fire in front of McDonald's that will take one fire department. So when I pulled these numbers, I said, well, what were the big fires? And I kind of equated that if you have 3 different fire departments responding to this, it's probably a big fire without going through each call individually. So 88 total fires in Mason County, 22 were multi-jurisdictional, and 17 of those happened in Mason County. 17 total wildland fires or brush fires in Mason County, or sorry, in North Mason Fire. 2017, 101 in Mason County. 35 of those were multi-jurisdictional, and we had a total of 18 brush fires in North Mason area. 2018 increased to 138. 53 of those fires were multi-jurisdictional, and 27 of them were here in North Mason. I remember last year we had about 30 fires or so that were started roughly with suspicious circumstances in the south end of the county. So, take that into consideration. And then right now where we're at today, 18 fires in Mason County, 7 of them were multi-jurisdictional. And one of them was here in our town, or just, at the border of our town, up on the hill. Chief.
Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to talk about here real quickly is what do we do? What is our job when we go out and we're going to put these fires out, right? Because it is a totally different venue. We're really good, I'll be honest with you, the fire departments, we're really good on the left, right? That's when you talk about fire departments and fire districts, and when we're driving around with our big fire districts, a majority of our training is really geared towards what's on the left-hand side there. So our house fires and our car fire down below. The tool that we use still to this day is we pull up with the fire truck, we pull out the hose, we put a bunch of water on it. And generally the fires that are on the left-hand side, I want to say are relatively straightforward. I mean, there's a ton of complexity that goes into them, but there's a lot of pattern recognition. They're not overly, I don't want to say too terribly bad, too terribly big. They can be horribly bad. But generally those fires are out in maybe a couple of hours, right? And you get on the other side and we get into our wildland realm. And wildland realm is just an extremely complex environment for firefighters. It can be anything from the quarter-acre fire that we saw at Mrs. Smith's house to the hundreds of thousands of acres that we saw and we're seeing throughout the country and even here in Washington State. I'll be honest, there are multiple, when Jeremy talked about multiple jurisdictions that come out and actually help with these fires. The people that I'm happiest to see on these wildland fires is sitting right here, and that's our Department of Natural Resources and from Washington State. And they are the folks, I mean, when you talk about your wildland experts, they are it. They are truly it. They will sit there and say, we're not too good on the stuff on the left hand. You're okay with it, but we don't do that day in and day out, but we put our resources together when it comes to wildland firefighting. The reason why we do that is because generally in all neighborhoods and localities, there's a fire station. There's a local fire station nearby, fire trucks, volunteer responders, career responders, and we can generally get to those fires quite a bit quicker than DNR can. But where DNR comes in is because they're a state agency. When we're talking about the massive resources that some of these fires take, we don't have those as local fire departments. That's where the state comes in. And when we're talking about helicopters, we're talking about thousands of people that might be serving on these crews. That's when your state and federal resources are starting to get involved. So when you look at those 3 fires up there, there is a lot of similarity from the fire department standpoint how we go attack that. And what I mean by that is as we come out, the first thing we want to do is to be able to size up what exactly is going on. And when we get to a house fire, get to a car fire, we get to a wildland fire, what exactly is taking place? And that can be very difficult with a wildland fire. When you have got multiple acres and you don't have a good vantage point to be able to see exactly how much is burned, where is it burning, which direction is it heading, it can take a considerable amount of time to size up what exactly is going on with this fire. And you will see that your size up will change on many different fronts throughout the duration of the incident as you get more and more information. And there's times where it might be 24 and 48 hours before you have a full good size up. But sometimes when we watch the news, you go, well, wait a minute, this fire was 100 acres and now it's grown. This number is getting bigger. Well, we're getting more information from the size up. As soon as a size up, and whether it's complete, and in a lot of cases it's not, but a lot of times we pull up with our fire truck, we take a look. We're going to take a look and get as much information on that size up as we can, and we immediately put together an action plan. And that action plan is generally drawn up in our head with a command board. It's really for probably the first hour of activity, maybe 2 hours worth of activity until our partners from the DNR show up. The first thing that we are, and same thing with house fires and car fires, the first thing that we are just absolutely number one concerned about is the protection of life. If we have people that are in harm's way, and when we say protection of life, that is not just immediately pulling somebody out of fire. That might be evacuations. That might be being able to get people out of the fire's path. But when we're talking about lives and people that are in the path of fire, it is about getting them to an area of safety. That is our number one concern when we show up. If we can sit there and say, hey, and we have to almost look at each other at an incident command post and say, hey, are we assured that the life safety out there is taken care of and that we are comfortable with the action plan going forward? We then moved into protection of an improved property. And when we talk about improved property, we're talking about outbuildings, we're talking about houses, we're talking about cars, but people's stuff. Right? That's what is next, and then almost interchangeable. I don't want to say that one is over the other, but the other thing is the protection of critical infrastructure. And what we know is that unlike a house and car fire, which is somewhat isolated, a wildfire has an opportunity to take over an entire community. And when we talk about critical infrastructure, we're talking about roads, we're talking about bridges, we're talking about power lines, we're talking about some things that absolutely are necessary to run your community, and protecting those is paramount. And one of the things that we have here in North Mason and all throughout Mason County is we've got a lot of neighborhoods that are one way in and one way out. There's a lot of dirt driveways. It's one way in and one way out. And so you might sit there and say, well, calling a dirt driveway critical infrastructure or calling a roadway critical infrastructure, does that make sense? Absolutely. When it's the only way in and out, sometimes that is target number one for protection measures to get people in and out of a neighborhood to make sure we can evacuate safely. And one of the things that, and this is a misnomer, this happens to us quite a bit, is that, we get to a fire, a wildland fire that's pretty good size, and people yell at us. What do you think they yell at us? Put water on it, put water on it, put water on it, immediately get to work, put water on it. And you're right, if we're in a house fire and we're in a car fire, that is going to be, for the most part, our action strategy. Get water on the fire, let's get this thing put out quickly as possible. DNR does a very good job of making fun of the fire departments, and rightfully so, because we have a tendency to come in, blast water all over the place, because that's what we know. But you know what? That really isn't the best tool. It's one of the tools, but it's not the most important tool for fighting these wildland fires. What we're going to see in most circumstances, I'm going to turn it over to DNR here to talk about what their role is, because our role is really kind of the first couple of hours, but really is containing. Where exactly is this fire at? Where is it burning? And how do we keep it to that path? We don't want this thing growing. We don't want it getting any bigger. We don't want it moving. We don't want it getting past a quarter acre. So how do we make that from happening? Then get this thing put out, and then let's figure out and investigate what ended up taking place. And when we talk about the containment strategies, there's a lot of different containment strategies that we can get into that DNR does. But really, one of the things that I cannot stress enough, and we've had a couple incidents here recently, is making sure that when we see fire and we see smoke or we see anything of any suspicion, that we call it in. And the reason why I say that is because there's times that, like, oh, I smell some smoke, it can't be that big a deal. Or, oh, do you see the smoke column down the road? I'm sure somebody already called that in and it's well taken care of. Seconds are everything, and we talk about that a lot when we're talking about medical emergencies, but it's no different than fire emergencies. And one of the things that you're seeing is that what will make and break a lot of our fires is what happens in the first hour. How quickly is this thing detected? And that is what we need our community helps from a standpoint. And then second of all, how quickly do we get there onto the scene, and how quickly do we get our action plan together? Yeah, I've seen successful efforts where we've done a really good job and we keep a fire very much in check very quickly. And I've also seen some action plans where Boy, it probably could have been a little bit smaller. We probably could have got out of here a little bit sooner had we contained this a little bit earlier on. So what happens in the first, just hour or 2 hours can really talk about what's going to happen in their duration. And you're seeing that with DNR. And like I said, I'm going to turn over this microphone, but with DNR, you're seeing the most aggressive firefighting from DNR that we've seen in my 20 years. They are recognizing in DNR, and they have for a long time, but DNR is really being aggressive and saying, hey, we have got to jump on this thing early. They'll talk about their efforts, but getting helicopters within 15, 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes. 20 years ago, that didn't happen. 10 years ago, that didn't happen. But those resources are pre-staged and ready to go, and it's been amazing to see how fast DNR. But when we turn this fire over and we sit there and say, hey, fire department's going to kind of go back to doing our fire role within the community and putting out house fires, we turn it over to DNR and they take off from there.
First of all, my name's Sean Bradshaw. Thanks for having me. I'm the Assistant Fire Unit Manager for the Spillman Unit out of South Puget Sound region for the Washington Department of Natural Resources. So I guess first off, we rely on these guys, the district, an awful lot. We just don't have the capabilities to have that fast response, and we don't have enough engines and resources spread throughout the county to have that fast 5 to 10 minute response to a 911 call, a smoke report. So these guys help us out a ton with getting on scene and knocking down a lot of these fires and saving us from them getting a lot bigger. First of all, and they help us. They're a huge asset to us when they get on scene, and they'll give a size up over the radio of what the fire's doing, where it's at, and it will give us a general idea because we're monitoring the radio. We usually get the active 911 alerts of brush fires, and we'll kind of assess what's going on, and that's how we'll dictate how many engines and what resources we're going to send. And we've created a pretty good partnership over the last couple years. It's gotten really good. We're going out and training and working with districts and kind of going over what we do when we get on scene and what we like to hear over the radio as far as size ups go. So we're kind of talking the same language more. And primarily, our goal is, number one, is always life and safety of people as well when we get on scene. And when we get a large fire, something we hear structures threatened, that's automatically, we have a resource coordinator type role, which is either myself, it rotates throughout the other assistant and fire unit managers. And the second we hear like structures threatened, if we have a helicopter working on another fire somewhere else in the region at the same time, the structures threatened, lives threatened, that always takes priority. So we'll pull those resources off of other fires if needed, if there's immediate life and structures threatened. So like he was saying, we use different tactics when we get on scene than the district primarily does. Our main goal when myself and the rest of us roll up on a fire is to we tie in usually with district and work into that unified command structure, and we both work together, DNR and the local fire district, and determine what resources are needed and come up with a game plan and kind of look at that box where this fire is burning, what's it burning into, if there's any structures threatened. Evaluating if there's any public that's immediately threatened or life's threatened, and that's our number one priority. And we'll look at, say it's in a timbered forest area, and if we have structures to the west of it, and there's nothing but timber and forest lands to the east side of that fire, well, automatically that west side's where we're going to start putting in our line in an anchor point, and that's where we'll have the rotors working if the fire needs aviation, helicopter resources, and that's where we'll start punching that dozer line. And that's kind of explains why if we have 3 or 4 different fires going on within the county at the same time, you may see a couple of the smaller fires or fires that are even bigger than other ones out there that maybe aren't being staffed at the time. They're being let burn. They're being let go, and that's because there's probably another fire going on actively within the region or the area that actually has those assets and structures and stuff threatened at the time. We're basically just trying to spread out our resources to the highest priority level of the fire at the time. That doesn't happen all the time, and usually we have enough resources to spread our coverage out. And we'll surround it and drown it is our goal. We'll look at that fire where it's burning, see what man-made barriers we have in place, if there's any natural as far as rivers, roads, dirt roads, and we'll basically go off of that and say, hey, well, we can use this road that's going along this section of the fire. We can tie in there, and that road will act as a line, and we may even let that fire just creep all the way to that road, and we'll wrap it and put either dozer line or hand line and use helicopters that knock down the flames, and then put the line around it down to bare mineral soil, and then surround it, and then we'll start the mop-up phase. And basically, when we call a fire contained, that's when we're working in that unified command structure, and we're committed with each other, ourselves and the district, until that fire is up to containment, which basically means that we have line completely around the fire at that time. We've stopped the forward rate of spread of the fire, and there's little to no risk of that fire escaping and being a threat to anything else and spreading beyond the footprint that it's already in. And then at that point, we'll either transition out of that unified command structure, and DNR will take over, and we usually hire the district's tenders if needed, and any additional support that we may need on that fire. And then we'll go into that mop-up phase. So basically, when we have that fire surrounded, that's when we call it contained, and the controls when it's basically out. So I think that's about all I got. Is anybody got any questions for me right now?
Where do you keep all the equipment? Do you have it strategically located so you can access?
Good question. So up here, South Puget Sound region is broken up into 3 different units. So basically we cover Mason County, King County, Kitsap County, Pierce County, and Thurston County, and part of Lewis County. And so it's broken up to 3 units. We got Pinnacle Unit, which is up towards the Eatonville area, and Enumclaw, and then we'll have the Capital Unit, which is based out of Tumwater, and then we'll have the Spillman Unit, which is up here, which is where I work out of. Basically, we have 2 engines staffed down towards Shelton, and then we have 3 engines up here, actually out of Belfair, that are staffed up here. But throughout the day, we'll do all the work we need to do, and all of our necessities like rolling hose and just getting fire-ready training. And then in the afternoon, when the higher fire danger hours come and the temperatures get hotter, then we'll disperse and spread our engines throughout the county, so we have roughly equal coverage throughout the rest of the county. So we have 5 engines up here in Mason and Kitsap County total, and then Thurston, we have 4 down there in Thurston County, and then Pinnacle Unit also has 4 engines. And so we get tapped out here. We got a couple of big fires going up here. And all of our resources are used, right? All of our 5 engines, say, are committed on fires up here. Then the resource coordinator will work and try to bump engines up if say the Tumwater unit doesn't have any fires going at that time. We'll try to move those engines and shift them up in case we have a 3rd start or a 4th start up in this area. And when I first, about a couple years ago, we didn't have we didn't have a helicopter always full-time staffed out of Olympia, but now for the most part we do all the time, which is a huge asset to us on getting on these fires early. And we'll work with district because we may be an hour and a half out, or we know we have an extended ETA, or district's calling us, or MACECOM, we're talking to them and they're saying, and when we're listening to the radio and it sounds like it's really doing something, we'll launch that helicopter just to be on the safe side, whether we know that if it's needed or not, just in case, just because of our extended ETA, and to get eyes on scene. And if that resource is needed to protect life and property, ultimately, it's there sooner than later. So I hope that makes sense. So, okay.
In that helicopter, we had the Forest Springs fire last year up above Tahuya, and the helicopters were amazing.
Yeah.
You could just drop down into the local lakes, pick up their buckets.
They're a huge help, and they're a huge asset. And yeah, we for the most of the time now, we pretty much always have one staffed out of Olympia, and there's another one that we can get if we need a 2nd helicopter. Usually, depending on what fires are going on at that time and where they're getting shifted to in the state, but usually there's another one that's 30 to 45 minutes out from the one that's out of Olympia. So the Olympia helicopter can get up here once they're called. They can respond and be up here within 10 to 20 minutes tops. So it's a pretty quick asset to have, and a really good resource. So, any other questions? Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Just to point out, you know, we get a lot of news coverage and whatnot on the different type of fires. The majority of our fires are relatively small. I mean, when we talk about the numbers that Jeremy was talking about up there, the majority of them are pretty small. But we don't underestimate those. I mean, the Mrs. Smith's fire could have easily been multiple acres if it. I mean, we had the tree line that was right there and whatnot. If we're not there quickly, if we don't have these pre-positioned resources, if we don't jump on these when they're a half acre, I mean, it can get out of control pretty quick.
Well, one thing I didn't mention, I apologize, is that DNR was right there and digging a trench all the way around the area. And stayed for quite a while, 3 of them digging very rocky ground, and I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. We'll continue on here a little bit. Uh-oh, if I can find my clicker. See, that's what happens when you walk around. Leave stuff laying around. So, we kind of talked about our response and how we get the resources to you, but let's talk about how we can make it so maybe you'll never need the resources, which is good in the end. We're going to talk about a defensible space. We're going to talk about make your home fire resistant, get ready, creating a plan, and then having the supplies in case you do have to evacuate. First thing, and there's a whole bunch of flyers in the back, and I'm just going to show these to you so you have them, but the defensible space, there's a cartoon illustration, and then also it's in the wildfire action guide too. So all this information's there. You can write it down. This PowerPoint will be provided to you on our website if you guys want to get to it later, or it comes right out of these books that we're going to read right now or talk about. So defensible space is space between the structure and the wildland area that will create a sufficient buffer to slow or halt the spread of a fire to the structure. And there's 3 zones. First zone, generally speaking, 0 to 5 feet. Second zone is 5 to 30 feet. And zone 3 is 30 to 200 feet. And all this does is when we go through these slides, it's going to allow you to think about what is in those areas around your house right now. Now, I have to tell you, when I was doing this, I was thinking of my own house and how many of these rules that I'm breaking that this weekend I'm going to have to go home and fix some of this stuff. So, first one is zone 1, 0 to 5 feet from the home. Provide hard surfaces and non-combustible material there. If you think about your house now, some people have grass that goes all the way up to the house. Or what do you put around your house? Bushes. And they're recommending that you have sidewalks or rock, 5 feet out, neatly trimmed grass, stuff that fire, if it were to hit, probably isn't going to go far, and if it does, it's not going to go fast. Clean your roofs and gutters, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. Flying embers start roofs on fire all the time. So clean your gutters and clean your roofs. It was funny, I was doing a search for some pictures on here, and you put clean your gutters, and there's a whole list of companies that come up. And it's like, wow, I should put all those lists of companies on here and get some people people to come out and help them out. Storage of firewood. Routinely on house fires. Now again, we're really good at house fires. We go to them. I see people store firewood next to their house. When I mean next to their house, I mean front porch, cord of wood. And all that does is present a huge fire load. And if you get an ember in that or any fire radiant heat to that fire loading on your porch will take the whole house down. So storage of firewood, make sure that you do not store firewood in that zone 1. Trim the trees and low-hanging bushes or branches. What you want to do is make sure that the trees aren't touching the ground. They're small, they're high up off the ground, they're not touching your house at all. Because remember, fire is going to travel through those. Remove or replace roof shingles to prevent embers from getting in there. So if you have roof shingles that are loose or missing, make sure you replace that because that's your biggest protection for your roof. And here's a couple illustrations, probably a little bit easier to see on the PowerPoint when you download it, but just some ideas of what the defensible space. You see the sidewalk and the rock along there. I call it the Arizona house. This right-hand one. That's what every house in Arizona looks like. And I don't think it's for defensible space. I just think it's because they can't grow grass there. But it's gravel and rock and low bushes. Zone 2, 50 to 30 feet. Use non-wood, low-growing somebody else is going to have to say that. Herbaceous. My sister-in-law would not talk to me right now because she's a plant girl, but vegetation. You don't want stuff that grows big and supports fire combustion. You want the stuff that's green and low and hard to burn. Create groups of vegetation versus continuous. So a group of vegetation here separated by rock and sidewalks, and then another group of vegetation. You don't want it to basically bring this fire through the zones. Remove ladder fuels. Does anybody know what a ladder fuel is? So think of a ladder, right? Climbing a ladder. A ladder fuel is something that's going to take something from the ground and move it to a bush, move it to a small tree, move it to a big tree, move it to your house. So it's a ladder, progressively getting bigger. So you want to break that chain or break the rungs out of the ladder. Keep grass under 4 inches tall. Watered green grass works really well. Place sheds and storage buildings outside of that area. You know, once you have that storage building, just like the wood pile, if that wood pile catches on fire, the radiant heat from that is going to transfer to your house and catch it on fire. So what they want you to do is keep those over 30 feet away from your house. So if it does catch on fire, we have the opportunity to put that out before it catches your house on fire. And here's an example of that, the picture I showed you earlier. And just, you see that house, which I would consider somewhere probably in eastern Washington, maybe Leavenworth area. See the trees are trimmed all the way up. They have rock in there. They do have plant vegetation groups, but they're small and they're contained to small groups that aren't continuous. And then you have the, probably California home there again, or Arizona home. It's all rock in the front yard, which is amazingly easy to take care of. So if we didn't have so much rain here, that would be perfect. And then in defensible space, zone 3, 30 to 200 feet. Minimum of 10 feet between tree tops. You don't want the trees to touch each other, because what happens if that tree does catch on fire? What's it going to do? Go to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Again, remove the ladder fuels. Create separation between the low-level vegetation and the tree branches. And remove dead trees and shrubs. I think people, she's looking at him right now, because I guarantee I did the same thing in my yard. Yeah. I trimmed all my trees, trimmed all my branches, when it got nice out, and where are they all sitting? In a big pile in my yard. And
Inside zone 3.
Yeah, inside zone 3, maybe pushing zone 2. So when I type this up, and if you think about it, how much fire that will support, and that's going to definitely start catching the other zones on fire. So remove that stuff, get it out away from your zones. And here's a couple examples of that. That bottom one is a perfect example of a fire burning through zone 3 and zone 2 and stopping at the first zone, because they were able to slow that fire down to where it eventually stopped before it hit the house. That's all black area there, burnt area. And it works. Otherwise, we won't be here teaching it to you.
Ooh.
So making your home fire resistant, balconies and decks. Use non-combustible materials. Embers like to go under decks, catch all that dry grass you have on fire, and then light your deck on fire or a balcony on fire. That's a picture of a bunch of balconies burning. We make them out of wood. Bottom balcony starts on fire, fire goes up and out. It's going to start everything else on fire, including if you have a one-story house, what's the next thing that's catching on fire? Underneath your eaves, right? Because that's where the fire is going to want to go. So construct with non-combustible materials, a lot more frequently done now. Trex is a name brand material, but that's used a lot. Don't store items under your deck. The number 2 place I see wood piles, under decks, right? Second story decks, people stack a bunch of wood under them because it keeps it dry. It's easy. Get that wood out of there. Roofs, the most vulnerable surface. When embers become lodged in your roof material, fortunately out here we don't see a lot of the cedar roofs. We have asphalt composite DeWattle area, do you guys have metal roofs? A lot of metal roofs out there? Yeah, and I'm seeing that more and more. You know, this doesn't really apply to you, but the second one does. Constructing of non-combustible material, that's really important. You know, especially if you live in those areas. There's a picture of the house down there on the right. That's a metal roof. Right, there's another perfect example of a defensible zone that worked.
How does Trex respond?
Trex is extremely hard to burn. It will burn.
Does it just melt? Or?
Yeah, it's a composite material, so it takes a lot to burn. When it does start burning, though, it's a pretty good fuel, but it takes a lot to get it there. Block off your rain gutters. They have rain gutter covers for the people, and basically what that does is keeps the pine needles out of your gutters to accumulate. And then keep your roof clean of small fuels. If you live under pine trees or cedar trees, all that stuff falls off and it sits on your roof until you finally get up there and blow it off with a weed blower, right? And then it comes back about a week later. So you got to keep those roofs clean.
Is there any history of how good, like, the composite decks roofs are actually? And somebody was telling me that a lot of the houses that burned down there, like Paradise in California, composite roofs didn't seem to,
Non-combustible roofs?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just know from my experience of seeing the metal roofs, they seem to work.
Oh, yeah.
I think what it really does is it prevents the fire from getting the
No, like
fuels
a
on the roof on
three-tap-
fire.
Three-tap type, they have a fire rating, but
The asphalt shingles?
Oh, asphalt shingles.
mineral coated.
Yeah, I'm sure they make a fire-resistant 3-tab. I'm not an expert at
I'm not
building
either.
materials.
Yeah, I have to check into that. But.
A lot of the areas that are prone to wildland, you'll see metal roofs or tile roofs. I think is kind of what they're going to now. Eaves and vents, again, more of this prevention of keeping embers from going into your house. Clear the debris under the eaves. You know, if you have open eaves, box them in to prevent open spaces, and then place the vents on them. There's just a couple different examples of the vents that are out there now. Bird blocking, if you think of bird blocking now in Washington, we all have, you know, kind of the big, that keeps the big birds out, but, you know, they're recommending mesh to keep the embers out, more finer embers. And then your roof fence. Again, Washington doesn't have a lot of this stuff on the west side because, you know, the wildland fire, when people look at building codes on the east side, that's where they're applying this stuff to. They haven't quite caught up on the west side yet. Walls and fencing. If you have a wall or a fence that connects to your house, make sure it's non-combustible or metal it until it gets out of the defensible zone and then go to a different material. Again, a fence or wall is going to make that fire come to your house, and you don't want that to happen. Remove small debris that lodges in the crevices of the fence. Think of a cedar fence or a wood fence that you paint or coat. You can use some fire retardant type stuff on it. But all those little pine needles and stuff that get stuck in there, or more importantly, underneath your fence where you never weed eat because the lawnmower doesn't, you know, hit it and you just leave it till it grows up to about this high. That stuff you need to get rid of. Because once that starts on fire, the chances of your fence catching on fire and then your house catching on fire go up. Windows and doors. Install weather stripping around the doors, especially your garage door. Most of us are really good about having weather stripping around our house doors because in the wintertime we figure out that we need to have that. But what we don't check is our garage doors. So, and remember, the wind hits that and blows embers in your garage. Now you don't only have combustible material from the house, you have combustible material in your garage. Because I don't know about anybody else here, but most people store stuff in their house, in their garage, that is combustible. Remove plants from window holders. And I know they look nice on the windows, and you can open the window and water them. Those dry out and burn. That's just going to bring that radiant heat right to your house. Dual pane windows with tempered glass are less likely to shatter from radiant heat. And in wildfire, what we're trying to do is prevent the fire spread not only from conduction, you know, touching each other, or convection from the heat, but also the radiant heat that's coming off of that. And just think of yourself sitting in front of a a campfire, and then somebody goes and gets 15 pieces of wood and puts it on there, and you all pick up your seat and back up. That's just that's magnified by your house. And we're talking a little fire, put the whole front yard on fire and what that's going to do to your house. So we're trying to prevent that, and double pane with tempered glass help with that. So those are the ways that you could secure your house from danger or prevent fire into your house. Let's talk about what you need to do as family members or citizens or myself. Create a family disaster plan. We talk about this all the time. We teach earthquake drills. We teach flood drills, wildfire drills. The disaster plan is the same. You need to leave your home. What are you going to do? If I asked everybody right now, you cannot go home. The road is cut off. You now have to stay here. What is the number one thing you're going to say? I need my dogs. Okay. If it was a different age demographic, what would they say?
Computers.
Get my cell phones, my computers, right? Or medications. Or how many people here have your insurance policy with you? How many people here have cash on them enough to support themselves for a week? Vehicle titles, an extra set of vehicle keys, stuff like that. So we're going to talk about that real quick. So create a family disaster plan, locations, disaster, communication plan, and practice it, practice it, practice it. My kids absolutely do not like waking up and doing a fire drill in the middle of the night. But if I don't do it with them and they go to school and the teacher says, when's the last time you did a fire drill? And the kid says, never, that's bad, right? From my standpoint, think of that from you guys. If you don't practice this drill or know the roads to get out or a backup road, it's going to be a problem. Have a fire extinguisher and practice the use of that. Big way to slow down fire spread is having a fire extinguisher for immediate risk. Know where your utility shutoffs are, your gas, your power, your water, and more specifically, have your spouse know where those are. Where's the water shutoff? In my family, I didn't know where the water shut off. When I bought the house, my wife was there. They said, "Oh, it's over there under the rock, behind the thing." She knew where that was. I knew where everything else was. So know where those are and convey that. Make sure you have the right tools to shut all that stuff off too. Assemble your kits, and we're going to talk about disaster kits and what you could have. The nice thing is if you assemble one kit, it will work for all the disasters. So you only need one kit. You don't need a wildfire kit, an earthquake kit, and all that stuff. Make sure you have an out-of-area contact, somebody that you could contact. List of emergency numbers for your family. Right now, if I were to take all your cell phones away and say, call grandma in Minnesota, would you know that number? I wouldn't know my grandma's phone number or my uncle's number or anything. It's all on the phone now, right? So have that stuff in your kit available. And don't forget your pets. You guys said it. Remember your pets. Get set to leave. Monitor the TV, the radio. We're big into Twitter now. I understand people here do not use all these different type of communications. At some point, you're gonna have to work with this stuff because that's where technology is gonna go. There's TV, there's radio. The problem is, what is the fastest way to communicate right now? Twitter and Facebook, right? If you want something said, I guarantee before you get back to Duwato, I could have 5 stories made up. And everybody will know that. How long does it take me to get to the news? A lot longer. So, unfortunately, with that brings up some other concerns, right? Some of the information you get on Facebook and Twitter might not always be right. We'll talk about that in just a second. But, sorry.
So that was the key. So I live about 500 feet from the edge of the Forest Spring fire last year. The wind was going the other way, so we knew we were okay, but I had no way of knowing how to know if we needed to evacuate.
We're going to talk about that.
Okay.
Thanks for that.
Okay.
So, understand the different communications. We're going to talk about what we do in Mason County to help with those communication plans. Evacuate when you're told to do so. We have seen time and time again in wildfires across the United States, people getting hurt or even worse because they chose not to evacuate. When we do an evacuation, and we'll talk a little bit about that, it's not some underthought process. There's a lot of people involved in this process before they go, we want you out of your home. Dress appropriately, or at least have the means to dress yourself appropriately. I'm telling you what, jumpsuits and a pair of boots work great. They fit everybody and they're universal. So that's something you can throw in your bag and use. And then have an emergency kit ready to go with you, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. When you leave your house and you're in the evacuation plan, here's some things that you need to do. Close all your doors and windows. If you're in an evacuation zone, leave them unlocked. Why do we do that? The responders can get in and do that stuff without having to do a lot of forcible entry. And I say this when you're in an evacuation zone. Why do I say that? Typically, it's a secured area, right? So that's hard for people to understand, but from the wildfire standpoints and the Forest Service work, that's imperative to be able to get in and out and move around. Remove all the shades and curtains from the window. Why do we want to get the curtains out of the window? Yeah, radiant heat, right? Like we talked about. Move the furniture to the center of the room away from the windows and doors. Again, why are we doing that? Same thing. We don't want that radiant heat in. Turn off your pilot lights and your air conditioners. You don't need to air condition while it's not there, while you're not there. And the pilot lights, that's just in case, you know, the fuel gets shut off or turned back on inadvertently. And leave some lights on inside so crews can see inside your house with binoculars. And they do that so they can see if there's smoke conditions going on. Yeah.
So when you have an evacuation, you've issued an evacuation and you have this indoor checklist, when you issue that evacuation, do you say you have X amount of time to get out? Because like in my place, that right there is an all-day project.
And you're afraid to move the couch, right?
Yeah, no, I'm afraid I don't want to do it. So like, I mean, do you say you have an hour to get out? Do you have 2 hours to get out?
And I think those are phased evacuation plans. I've never been part of an evacuation here, fortunately. So I don't know how long that's take. Typically, I would estimate that you're given time, or there's steps to that process.
Typically, I believe, depending on what phase you're in of evacuation, for example, if we have a new start that happens and it's across the street from your house, you might be told to immediately evacuate. You may have no time to
Grab
you just be like, go now, grab your keys and go. Versus if it's something that's a larger size fire that's more established, it's a multiple day type of deal, they'll basically have a map. And when it gets to something that big, they'll have public relations folks, and they'll have a map and your different stages of evacuation zones, and you can look and see where you live on that map, and then it'll give you, it gives you a good idea when, how much time you may have and whether you need to evacuate, whether it's recommended to evacuate or just be prepared to evacuate.
And this is, again, you're going to be prepared. You're going to know this is happening in your area, right? And make sure that you start prepping when this is happening. When they're starting to talk about evacuation, don't wait till they say it's time to go. You know, it's okay to get this stuff ready. Outside your house, this might take a little bit longer. These are things you could do really right now. Bring combustible items from the exterior to the inside of the house, and we're talking lawn furniture and stuff like that. You know, I found in Arizona, California, stuff like that, they say just throw the lawn furniture in the pool. It will be fine there. And sometimes that's easier than trying to figure out how to store it in your house. Turn off your propane tanks and your gas meters. Don't leave your sprinklers running.
Why would you not do that?
Because what it does is if everybody in the neighborhood turns on their sprinkler, what happens to the water flow for the fire hydrants and the water system that the firefighters are trying to use?
But if you're in a well, window hydrants.
Yeah, it's just a recommendation. I mean, I'm doing what they say. They don't, because they'll come to your well and they'll take water, or they'll fill off of your faucets, or, I mean, we want that water to be there for firefighting. And a fire truck's going to be able to provide a lot better service than what that is. But this is probably more for an urban area that's using water systems. Leave your exterior lights on. Back in your vehicles when you park them, so you can be ready to go right away if there's an issue. Have a ladder available, and that was more of a kind of this, we're defending our house, we're not really sure, we're checking our roof, or we want to make sure the gutters are clean because we're getting close to this. A lot of people, the first time they see their ladder is when, what? Oh, I need to get up the roof and fix something, right? And then you have to play this, where did I put that thing last year? Notice it's broken. So have a ladder available, and patrol the areas to detect embers early. And that's your yard, that's your roof, that's under your deck, and that's the time you want to have a charged garden hose ready for that. So let's say you don't listen to the evacuation plan, which unfortunately does happen. Stay in your home until the fire passes. This is, you have impending fire that's going to overtake your house. Stay in your home. Excuse me. Bring a garden hose inside with you. You're inside your house. Bring the garden hose in case something happens inside the house. Now again, this is pretty serious stuff. This isn't the fire's 5 miles away, I'm going to hunker down in my house. This is the fire's in my front yard and there's 30, 40-foot flames coming at me. Wear long sleeves, long pants made of natural fibers. Stay hydrated. Ensure that you could always exit, but remember that if it's hot inside your house, it's a lot hotter outside that house. Fill sinks and bathtubs with water. Put towels under the door if you're hunkered down in a room. After the fire passes, combat the small fires that may be in or around the house, and then make sure that you contact 911 to advise what just happened. Now, they're probably a pretty good idea on a status board that we're going to know who did not evacuate. Who the people were said, I don't want to evacuate. There's going to be a star there. And it's going to be known that that's something we need to go check out. But this is the too late survival tips. Or you could probably translate that to too fast survival tips. So let's talk a little bit about emergency kits. These are things that you should have in your emergency kit. 3 days of supply of water, a gallon per person per day. That's a lot of water. Make sure you remember your pets too. First aid kit with sanitation supplies, flashlight, battery-powered radios, and extra batteries. And this is where I talked about earlier. Extra set of car keys, an extra credit card or a debit card, cash, extra eyeglasses, contact lenses, medications, family documents including insurance, a map of the area, especially out in the Dewato area. I can't think of a better place to have a map of all the extra roads that are out there, or the extra roads that nobody knows about on the map. Those are the ones that I'm going to want to know about. Easily carried valuables that you want to pack with you. Personal electronic devices and chargers. This is where the phones and the iPads and all that stuff come into effect. And I joke about it earlier with kids, and they have to have their electronics. As a father of a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, I could tell you that if I had to spend a week with my kids without some sort of electronic device, they're going to go absolute bonkers, and which is going to make us absolute bonkers. So remember those things are a deck of cards, something for the kids to do. If it's not an electric device, something for the kids to do. And then pet food for your animals. Communication. Let's talk a little bit about how we communicate in Mason County. The intent is to get the information out that is accurate and up to date as soon as possible. Information is not stored in a silo and said, well, we don't want to tell people stuff. We want to make sure when that information goes out that it's right and it's very definitive of what we want you to do. We work with multiple agencies to ensure that the information is correct. We don't want to tell you something about an evacuation plan if the sheriff's office is not part of that plan. We don't want to tell you something about where the fire is going to be anchored in if DNR is not part of that plan. So we have to sit in a room as part of public information officers and talk about what the information is that we're going to give out and make sure we're all on the same page. We provide a multi-jurisdictional approach to the communication plan. There could be 15 different agencies sitting in that room talking about that plan. Be cautious of getting information from any other source except for the following. And these are the ones that we recommend currently. Mason County Sheriff's Office Twitter page. Typically there we use the Sheriff's Office because they have one page for the entire county. So what I'm telling you now in North Mason, I can say, hey, get on my Twitter or go to my webpage. All the people watching TV or all the people that are in Allen are going to go, well, okay, well, but I can't get on North Mason's page because it's not happening. We always try to get the Sheriff's Office Public Information Officer involved, and we use their Twitter because it goes out the fastest.
Jeremy,
Yes, sir.
I use Twitter, and I retweet pretty much everything the sheriff's office.
Okay. And we've heard that from a lot of sources. Even with our emergency planning here at the school district, which again is multiple fire districts, we use the Sheriff's Office because everybody can key into that. The other one that we use for the Emergency Operations Center is MaceComms. And they're up there. Their information is probably also very fast and accurate because they're the ones talking on the radio to us. The information they hear is coming from us. Mason County DEM, back there, they have an information sheet that you can fill out. It's an emergency notification. You can put your information on here, and they send out mass email blasts, cell phone text messages. They have robocall features, and you can sign up for this, and they'll get that information out. And they're able to select the different areas. So Twitter's good. This is also great because you can select the area you want to be part of. You may be getting some information that's not keyed into Dewatto. It might be more keyed into North Mason or Belfair sometimes, but at least you're getting the information. So this is a great source. Fill this out. You can send it in, fax it in, give it to me. I'll get it to Ross McDowell out there at DEM. Great source to be part of. We also use our Facebook page. You probably noticed that Chief Bach has been doing awesome and updating people on different things that we're doing in our agency right now. It's a great source of information, and I can tell you that the information that's put on our Facebook page gets vetted. Nobody else edits that. There's 2 or 3 people that have access to that. We can do it remotely, so the information that's on there is very, very accurate. The problem is in these emergency situations, we're probably going to look to the Sheriff's Office and MaceCom to be getting that information out as fast as we can because they're going to be sitting in the room with us. But we understand that there's other mediums to get this stuff out. So we're going to we're using web TV, we're using the news stations and the radio stations. You're usually part of that group too to get that information out. Just know that they're not going to be as quick as some of these other sources. Any questions on that? Because I know that's always one of those things people go, how do I get a hold of you? And again, this will all be on there. You guys can have access to this. But remember the Sheriff's Office and MaceCom.
Yeah, and the biggest thing, and Jeremy will probably cover this a little bit, the one thing that just, and I don't mean to use the pun, but it takes off like wildfire, but is in social media where somebody says, I heard and I saw, and then it just takes off. And that information, there's times, we're looking at it back at the station or generally out of the fire line and just going, oh my gosh, that's so far from the truth. And, it becomes very difficult to, once that information's out, to reel it back in, it's impossible. And so I would really, really strongly encourage, if it's not coming from one of those things that you saw on the board, just really question the accuracy. And I've seen way too many times where there is just flat, blatant, wrong information that goes out and on these different social media websites. So just it makes our job really, really difficult because case in point is, and I think it was the Forest Springs fire. The reports were coming in that this thing is 70 acres and moving at 20 miles an hour, right? So if you're anywhere out there from Tahuya to Seabeck Hawley, right, you're calling the local fire station because you saw what's happening out there. Couldn't be further from the truth. It inundates our phone lines, it inundates our responders, all because of some misinformation. When it was a serious fire. That was a no kidding fire out there. But at the same time, sometimes the reports just get embellished and overblown. and it can really scare people, and I don't think it's fair to do that to people, but it is the day and age that we live in, so.
Yeah, we learned a lot from the active shooter incident we had a couple years ago up here at the high school with how fast stuff gets away around on Facebook. And we had people that are in our community that you would probably go, hey, we should listen to what they're saying. We had people that worked for the different agencies saying stuff that was completely inaccurate. And we spent a lot of time, probably 3/4 of the time, trying to combat that, and 1/4 of the time actually solving the issue. So we're really working on that communication plan. I think we're getting there. You know, the social media is a new thing that we're trying to, or not new for me, I guess. I mean, for the technological people, but we're trying to reel that stuff in. Let's talk about it. Yes.
Yeah, I've got that hookup to my phone for NACECOM.
Okay. Yeah.
Would that be the quickest way for me?
You know, from the Department of Emergency Management, this paper I was talking about. Yeah, for you. I mean, if you don't have Twitter, then that would be quick. Just know it takes a while because they have to disperse that information, and not a while, but Twitter, we hit send and it goes beep, everybody in the room at the same time. If they're doing the robocall function, it's funny they have that for the school district, which works great. And sometimes we'll be the first one to get the phone call and the robocall thing, and then sometimes we'll be the 5 o'clock at night to get the robocall. It depends on how many times they go through it. So
I just wonder if that'd be quicker than my cell phone.
Text messages are probably pretty quick
Okay.
because they just send it out through the providers. Evacuations. It's always done as a last resort. Like I told you earlier, we don't sit around a table and go, hey, let's see if we get everybody in Dewato out to Belfair State Park for no reason. It's done because we put a lot of thought into it. It's to provide safety for the citizens, provide areas for the responders to work and protect the property safely. If we're trying to do a lot of operations in an area where a lot of people are, sometimes it's easier to say, you know what, let's back you off a little bit, let us do our job, and then we'll bring you back in as fast as we can. It's also prevented to prevent block or overcrowded roads. They'll systematically start removing areas of densities out of there, so we know that we're going to have 100 cars on this road in this 10 minutes and 100 cars on this road in this 10 minutes, instead of saying, okay, everybody north of Belfair State Park, out, there'll be an algorithm to it. And the assistance is provided by the MCSO, State Patrol, Fire District volunteers, all with identification. Nobody's going to walk up to your house or shouldn't walk up to your house and say, hey, get out, without them showing you some sort of identification or being in a uniform or having their ID with them. And that's a safety feature that we want you guys to have. Typically, what I see is the sheriff's office assists with us because the firefighters are usually combating the fire. Please, please, please follow the direction of the crews evacuating the neighborhoods. They might, even though you've lived there, they probably have a better grasp on where the fire is and which roads they want you on. And that's for emergency response vehicles, that's to get the citizens out safely, and they know the counts on the road. And they usually will have checkpoints that they check people in and out, so they know who's gone. Drive slow. People are still operating on these roads. Make sure that you have everything and remember your checklists. So this is stuff you should be doing way before the evacuation.
And I don't know if this is a good, I'm going to go just the opposite of evacuation. One of the things that is coming out in Kennewick right now is people heading into fire zones. And they're involving the local. We haven't had as big of a problem with this, but looky-loos that are getting scanner information or they're getting Facebook information, and they want to see the activity. So while, in Tri-Cities, while we're trying to evacuate out, emergency apparatus is trying to get in. They are actually fighting folks that are trying to get that, that picture or that video clip or whatnot. They're not moving vehicles, and the law enforcement is essentially kind of given a community-wide warning that, we don't want that to happen, and if it is, we don't have a lot of patience for that, because we've got to get folks out of their area safely. We've got to get crews in safely. This is not the time for picture taking. So just, it happens.
And that brings up a great point. Thanks, Chief, for reminding me. Bradshaw talked earlier about air operations, and I think I was going to mention it back then. everybody has a drone now, right, or an unmanned air system that they fly around. The quickest way to get a helicopter to leave the scene is to launch one of those. And it's no questions asked. It's no, hey, shoot, we'll come back in a couple minutes. That aircraft will be reallocated and placed somewhere else faster than you could get that drone off the ground. So if you see somebody flying a drone in a fire zone, or if you're thinking that, hey, it may be cool to get some pictures, remember that it's really, really going to hinder fire operations severely. So, and that's probably number one on their list. Drone flying, helicopter lands. Into questions. So, DNR has really put out a lot of public information on that now. So is the state of Washington, the Forest Service that uses a lot of helicopters. Please, please, please don't fly a drone in a fire zone. Please. Okay, where can you get more information? Firewise. A lot of this information provided back there is from Firewise. NFPA.org has the Firewise information. Or if you're Google savvy, type Firewise in. You'll have more information than you could read tonight. North Mason Regional Fire Authority, we have a fantastic website that has all this information on it. Probably starting in the next couple days, this PowerPoint will be on there, and you can download all this information. And then the Department of Natural Resources has a lot of information also on what you can do for the defensible zones and their operations here in the Puget Sound region. Some contact information for Chief Bakken and myself, and I did not have Mr. Bradshaw's information, but we'll write it on some walls before we leave.
Yeah, I got some business cards I can put on the back
Okay.
table too.
Perfect. I got his personal cell phone number too, so you guys could call him. All right, and then that leads me to my part's done. I want to hear from you guys. What do you have questions on? What can we help you with?
I told Kay to be first because she's got to leave.
Okay.
What about fireworks this year?
What about?
We set off fireworks in the South Shore, over the water, but once in a while, it goes up and over the top of the house and ends up in the street on 106.
So
That
what?
hasn't happened a lot, but
What about fireworks this year is the question. Currently, fireworks are regulated by the Mason County Fire Marshal's Office, and the Mason County Fire Marshal's Office has elected to follow the Washington State RCW, which most of the counties in the state follow unless they've exempted them. So right now there's no restrictions on the fireworks except for the type allowed by Washington State law. The times are posted. Generally speaking, and these change a little bit, I don't remember them all, but the 28th afternoon to the 5th to about noon is when you can light them off. And again, I don't go to the Mason County Fire Marshal's website. It'll give you the times you can do that. But as of right now, there's no restrictions on fireworks. So be prepared.
only the ones that are approved by Washington State.
Yes. Well,
If
safe
we
and
put
sane, 1.4.
reservations,
Yeah.
because our neighbors on the deck right in front of me were
Yeah.
sitting outside.
Well, unfortunately, that's we're here for the wildfire thing, which you're right, can't cause that. But yeah, that's a whole nother subject. We could have a whole nother meeting on fireworks. But right now, there's no change to the Washington State WAC on fireworks discharge.
There is a really good list, and somebody brought it up to me the other day. There's that list that you're talking about with the specific dates and times on the Mason County website.
Yep.
That you can look up.
In our fire station, we have a flyer of all the fireworks that are legal and the times too. I just got them in the mail from the State Patrol today, so they'll be available starting tomorrow morning if you want to come get those. And I'm sure we can
I
scan them.
need to call you anyway.
Sounds good. Any other questions? Yeah.
So last year, again, it's all about me. There were suspicious fires last year,
Mhm.
and then we also had the fire on Forest Springs. Was there ever a determined cause for that? And if so, where would you find out how a fire did get started?
So on those type of fires where DNR comes in, DNR has their own investigation unit, and they come in and do all the wildland fire investigation. You could contact DNR and ask for the cause of that or the report. And some of those things will stay under investigation for a long time because they're developing patterns or how things started, or is this somebody is doing it once a year, or what those are. So they may not give you that answer, but DNR right now is doing the investigative reports for those areas.
Yeah, and it's usually a pretty timely process, like he was saying. They're basically looking for trends and seeing if there's commonalities in certain areas where fires are occurring, if there's not an obvious start. So, and they're very quiet with even telling me and us about what starts fires. But I would suggest calling the South Puget Sound Region office, which you can find on our website if you go to South Puget Sound Region, and any of those investigations that have been complete, they should be available to you. So.
And last year, and I know it was in the paper, we, midsummer when we knew something just wasn't right in Mason County, we convened a task force. So every fire district in Mason County Sheriff's Office, we had, DNR was there. We had a whole plethora of agencies to sit there and say, we need to work on this together. And we did see that the fire activity kind of, I think, because one of the things we want to make sure that's on the front page of the paper. This is being witnessed, and that group has already reconvened again for this year. So we're not alarmed just yet. Nothing like what we had last year, but this group is working together just in case we see similar activity this year.
Well, and last year I know that a lot of the private companies closed their lands to the public, which I think was a big help in suppressing some of that. Was that a recommendation that would have come from this task force, or was that just something they decided to do on their own?
That would have been something they chose to do. They might have been done in consult, but ultimately they make that decision.
Yeah, and that's already being considered for some of the land out here. Pope Resources, I think, came out and said that they were considering shutting it down to public use. And I'm not here to talk for Pope Resources by any means, but that was something that was quoted in the paper. And yeah, it's an important consideration, right? If people are burning down your industry, they're going to have to cut it down, or cut down the access to it. But remember that some of these fires that are being started are people not following the rules anyways. So,
How about the people who haven't been aware of the burn ban? Is there...
Burn restrictions, the different restrictions on right now. So that's publicized a lot, and we try to get that information out. The best way for at least North Mason residents is to look on our webpage. It tells you right there on the front screen of where we're at. And Mason County Fire Marshals has it on their webpage. And I know we put out a post. I'm sure Diedrich reposted that. I think it probably even went out over the Sheriff's Office Twitter because we just wanted to see how that all worked. So we try to get that information out. Remember, we're in burn restrictions right now, which means you can still have a recreational fire and a design fire pit, and all that information's on our website. We actually made a whole cartoon. It's actually brilliantly done, by the way. Cartoon of what a design fire pit is, because we changed that. There's two things we changed. One was burn restrictions, because we used to say there's a burn ban with exception of, which confused people. So we say there's burn restrictions and then there's burn ban. Burn ban means nothing, right? And then we also changed approved pit to design pit, because everybody goes, well, what's an approved pit? Who approves that? So we do design pit, and then we give you kind of what that is. So there's pictures of what that looks like on our website. So we tried.
Seems like people come out for the weekend from the city or whatever, and they want to build their bonfires, and they don't know.
Yeah, we really recommend people that are part of those different developments to get that in their newsletters, and we're working with some of those people. VRBO is something else, or Airbnb, that we see a lot of that stuff going on, and we're working with those different companies to make sure they have links on how we do stuff. And typically the neighbors will say, hey, can you not do that? Here's the burn information. And that's the best source. It works a lot better when you as a neighbor just go, hey, did you know? Because what the first thing they do, call 911, we go out there and we say, hey, did you know? And they say, oh, no, and then they put it out. So 99% of the people that we go and tell they shouldn't have a fire. Now, whether they might not be completely honest with us or not, once we educate them, they put the fire out. There's not a lot of issues there. So but again, design fire pit and restrictions are all available on our website. and our Facebook and our reader boards and email. I don't know how else we send it out. I was going to say smoke signals, but that's not really funny. Any other questions, sir?
So last year, the burn ban was in like beginning of August.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any feelings on how this year might go as far as timing?
No, that's one of those decisions that's also not made just because. I could tell you from being involved in that a little bit is once you put the full burn ban on, it's going to stay on until it rains for about 2 weeks because we're not going to do on, off, on, off, on, off because all that does is confuse people. And we use DNR and their weather team and their scientists essentially to help us determine that. DNR has gone to a regional approach to do burn bans. We work very closely with DNR in the last couple of years to make sure that their burn bans or burn restrictions are matching what we're trying to do in the county, because that's another really confusing thing. Am I in DNR land or am I not in DNR land? That's a whole nother class, by the way. But we try to match theirs, but they're the experts. They have people go out every single day in multiple zones and check weather. And just because it's warm out or just because it's raining or vice versa doesn't necessitate burn ban on, burn ban off. What we want to do is look at the fuel, the moisture content of the fuel, how the fire spread ratings on those, and make an educated decision. And not speaking for every resident in Mason County, but just remember that we're also a recreational area. So people come to Mason County to recreate. So fires that are contained and well taken care of and using dry season firewood and pits that have defensible zones, didn't see one of those spread last year. What we're seeing is all the people that doesn't matter what you tell them probably would have started the fire anyways. So we really look at that hard when we talk about burn bans. Any other questions? Yeah, Kelly.
So I have a bunch of questions.
Okay.
And I think I've narrowed them down to 3, 2 for the just general room, and then one that will
Cover
answer the
later.
rest of my questions.
Okay.
Lots to go over later. So my first question is the 911 call.
Okay.
So down on the South Shore and probably like the Hood Sport area as well, where we are, you know, you've got a real 180-degree view of what's going on all these foothills. And it's really not uncommon, in my experience, to see little plumes of smoke. And I've always been like, hey, wonder what's going on over there. I've never once thought about calling 911. Because I don't want to flood it.
Call.
Okay. Is it better in that situation to actually call 911 or to call a non-emergency number?
Call 911.
Okay.
And what they're going to do is they are going to ask you a plethora of questions.
Okay.
And we have tried every means possible. And so just for example, last year we had a column somewhere out in the general vicinity of kind of the Sand Hill Road area. And we could see the plume. We could not find this thing to get our way in and whatnot. Somebody called in from 911. And we actually radioed an airplane we called Bremerton National and said, hey, will you go up and guide us in? And we had lights and sirens on our vehicles that the plane had picked up. It could see where the fire was at, and then could see the roadway and just guided us right in. Now that's kind of the far extreme, but we would rather have that happen and get us going early and find out it's absolutely nothing, which is great, compared to, well, I'm sure somebody else, or it's probably just a campfire or whatnot. And Forest Springs Road was just thought to be, was seen from the Lillywop, probably just a little plume over there. I'm sure it's not that big a deal. Chief Cooper rolls up, it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. So please call 911, don't use the non-emergency, get the emergency line, and we'll triangulate, try to zoom in on exactly where that's at from there. And we've got DNR in the field, us in the field, we've got multiple stations, we'll find it somehow, some way. And there's times where 911 might keep you on the line. And so while our crews are out there, they're continually asking you questions, and they've got their headset in one hand, or on their head, and they've got the radio on the other, and ping-ponging between you and us out there in the field. We're going to find it one way or the other.
Okay. Second question is about in-home fire extinguishers. Do you have specific recommendations in terms of like the size? Like I've got one little guy in a fairly large house with fairly large property, but I feel like that's maybe not sufficient. So do you have, is there a place where you can go to get recommendations for size, types of mounts, numbers, locations?
Absolutely, our website has that. Typically a 5 or 10 pound ABC extinguisher. The technical is a 2A 10BC extinguisher, and they sell them here in town, and they're great to have. We recommend, you know, for businesses, once a year they have to have them serviced. It's required by code. For homeowners, you know, 5 years, and then rotate them out and put another one in there. But put it somewhere where you get to it, not under the kitchen sink that further gets pushed back and back and back and back, and pretty soon it's back by the pipe.
Well, so you said practice for them, you can use them multiple times?
No, we have the ability to do training on those.
Okay.
In fact, we do it a couple times a year. I think the next one we have coming up is the teachers in service, and we light some stuff on fire and do them. A lot of work groups will have us come out and do them. I know Mason County, we teach some fire extinguisher training there. So we get used extinguishers all the time. The people, the 5-year extinguisher that they're like, I'm done with this, they bring it to us, and we're like, well, we'll see if it works and train people how to use it. You'd be amazed. How many people in this room have ever used a fire extinguisher? For real. Or practicing. I mean, actually pulled the pin and discharged it. Yeah, I mean, we're talking less than 50% of the people in the room. It's amazing when you put a fire extinguisher in somebody's hand and go, hey, use this. They're like, wow. You know, they didn't really know what that is. And then you have that dry chem in here for the rest of the night. You're smelling that. So, yeah, we could help you through that. It's on our website, too.
Okay, so 2 more quick questions.
Okay.
One, why do you shut off the water? You said at the very, very beginning, one of your exterior things, you shut the water off to your house? I think?
Yeah, so what that has to do, again, with the water, when your house, if it does catch on fire and it burns the pipes, then that water is just going to free flow. And we're just dumping water on the ground. And again, in an urban setting or a multiple well setting that people share the well, you're losing the water pressure for everybody else that's on that system.
Okay, which leads me to my final question.
Okay.
Does the fire department offer consultations to like households that are in unique situations?
Yeah. Well, North Basin, we do home safety inspections, and that would be one of those things. I think you live
I live down
in Union.
Yeah, down
Okay.
almost 100 farms.
So I would check with Chief Clint Volk down there at Fire District 6. I'm pretty sure they have the same power. I just don't want to speak for them, but most fire departments would love to come out to your house and go through your house, because it gets them used to your house. Believe it or not, it's one of their houses that they may respond to, and then it helps a customer out. So absolutely.
Cool.
That's it?
Well, no, I'm not.
No, okay. You say the rest.
I'll say the rest.
Any new questions from new people? No? Okay. I knew there had to be one.
How many gallons are in one of those buckets that are carried by the helicopter? I'm curious.
It all varies, and we have a new belly tank too this year that we're using, but it's anywhere from 250 to 350, depending on what tank it is, and they have different size Bambi buckets for the different size of rotors, and I believe, and I'd have to, don't quote me on this, but I believe the new tank is 350 gallons. So 350 or 400, and it can fill up with a snorkel in about 30 seconds. And so it's pretty impressive.
That's pretty quick. That is.
Yeah, it's kind of hard for me to believe, just 'cause drafting with engines and stuff, and pulling with the engines and the pumps and the engines takes a lot longer than that. So
And when they dump, what type of an area does it cover?
it all varies. So they have different capabilities with the bucket where they can release it slowly and let less water out at once, or they can drop it and use about half the water that's in the bucket. And then I've been told with the new belly tank that they have 3 doors on it, and basically they can drop a 1/3 of a load, or half, or 2/3, or all of it. And it kind of just varies, so they can use it and actually break that load into 3 different loads and smaller loads, and make 3 separate drops. And that's kind of what they're testing that tank out right now, and it's I don't know all the exact details on it for sure, but if you'd like, I can get the absolute all the details on that, and I can get back to you. But it's pretty cool, and it's brand new this year for us.
how big of an area would it cover?
It all, I guess it's all kind of varies on if how high the helicopter is in the air and if it's moving. If it's moving and how fast it's moving will kind of depend, you know, how far that water's carried once he drops it, and also how high it is, and basically how it can cover a pretty wide area if they're high, but they may not be getting a whole lot of coverage in that area. You know, the lower they are, the smaller the area they're dropping on, the more water they're going to be dropping on that one single spot. So if it's a grass fire, they're trying to get higher and go faster and drop it a further area and make it go a longer area along the line. If that makes sense. But if they're dropping on, say, a heavy slash pile that's really hot and needs a lot of water, they're going to try to drop it all in one small single area.
Do we still use borate at all?
We on the airplanes, yeah, and then the helicopters. They have the capabilities of putting a foam mixture system in that water when they pick up that water with the buckets and stuff. So that's pretty cool too, and that will help the water be more effective and go further. So, yeah.
Okay, well, right up around our 7 o'clock ending period, I wanted to thank the Mason County EDC, the Chamber of Commerce, definitely Diedrich for coming out and filming, and on behalf of North Mason Fire Authority, you guys for definitely coming out and listening to us today. We're going to be around for a little bit, so more than happy to answer your questions. But thanks for coming. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. Oh, and DNR. Sorry, Bradshaw, I just totally blew you out.
No, you're good. You're good.